Two suspected terrorists are facing federal charges after allegedly, it's caught on camera, throwing IEDs at a protest outside of the New York City mayor's home, Gracie Mansion. Actions authorities call ISIS-inspired. But that's not at all how CNN would have you believe. In a now deleted X post, not a news organization, said, quote, two Pennsylvania teenagers crossed into New York City Saturday morning for what could have been a normal day, enjoying the city during abnormally warm weather. But in less than an hour, their lives would drastically change as the pair would be arrested for throwing homemade bombs during an anti-Muslim protest outside of Mayor Zoran Mamdani's home.
The backlash to this post was intense and immediate, with CNN apologizing for the post, saying it, quote, failed to reflect the gravity of the incident, thereby breaching the editorial standards we require for all our reporting. Okay, for more, let's bring in the Babylon Bee CEO, Seth Dillon. Seth, good to have you with us. I read what CNN said about the post and their apology, and I kind of don't believe them on that one. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I love that dramatic reading of the post. That made it even funnier than it already was. But it's one of those examples where you run across something real and you have to double check, like, did this come from an actual news organization or is this satire? Because you read that and it does sound like something that we might write, making fun of a news organization that is unable to report the truth, unwilling to report the truth. So, it's kind of funny on its face at first when you glance at it, and then you realize, wait, this came from CNN. And I think it's funny how, CNN is like extremely similar to us in the sense that they publish funny fake news, but the difference is we actually admit that we're joking. Like we are trying to joke. They're actually trying to be serious with it. So that's the main distinction. Plus our stories come true sometimes, which I guess is another distinction.
Seth, I'll paraphrase something that Greg Gutfeld said earlier on the Five, that this CNN is kind of like that Dunkin' Donuts that gets photographed when it's closed with the rats running around inside of it. And it winds up in the New York Post, that delicious, fantabulous newspaper. We're owned by the same leadership. And that photo appears over and over again. And you just might as well just lock it up and just move on. You just have to shut down and just open up shop somewhere else and call it like the Hunkin' Honuts or something like that, because you're just never going to make it work, because you're just so awful at making donuts and keeping your shop clean. And they're just so awful at producing news.
Well, we've been making fun of them for a long time. If you remember, you got to go back years now. This is all the way back in 2018. One of the first jokes we ever got fact checked for, when the media was mistreating us, was a joke about CNN purchasing an industrial-sized washing machine to spin the news in before publishing it. So we've been making headlines about CNN for a long time, and often getting in trouble with it. I think it's crazy how a satire site, a Christian satire site, is often treated more harshly than actual terrorists. They're extremely charitable to the motives and actions of terrorists, while being as uncharitable as possible towards just people like us making jokes on the internet. It's completely inverted. It's the moral upside down. And their explanation for this, which was supposed to be an apology, I guess, that they didn't, it didn't follow their standards, because it was it just didn't capture the gravity of the situation. That wasn't really the issue. As some people were pointing out in the comments, the real issue was, it's not that it didn't capture the gravity of the situation. Of course, it didn't do that, but it also just didn't give us the facts. It didn't tell us the who, what, where, when, and why, so that people would be informed. It intentionally left people in the dark. They might as well have just not covered the story at all. You would have been every bit as informed as you were by reading it.
Well, and it was such a heavy framing, and it reminds me of like when I read about the Maryland man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, or when I read about the Ayatollah dying. I think it was in the New York Times, and he was an avuncular, austere religious scholar. And I'm just thinking, well, I don't think that's the story. I think you're trying to put a veneer on this thing. So maybe it's bigger than CNN, Seth. It's like how a certain part of of our polity or world wants to write right now. They want to invent their own realities and do it in what we call news sites.
And they're not even careful about it. Like you're saying, it's so exaggerated. That's why it almost crosses those lines, and where it becomes difficult to distinguish it from satire is because it's so unbelievably over the top and in your face. It's not even the least bit subtle. So it's inexcusable. Honestly, it's not a mistake. It's not something that's just like, oh, well, this was unprofessional. No, it's actually wrong. It's actually morally wrong and unethical to report in this way, because you're not giving people the truth. You are deliberately trying to conceal the truth because you have a narrative that you care about, and a story that you would, if you did report on it truthfully, would run counter to your narrative. That's not journalism.
But Brian hit on something really quickly, Seth, is that once something like the Maryland Father is created, that phrasing, that phraseology, it becomes caught up in the circular left-wing media verse, and it was repeated over and over again. I heard that phrase on a local newscast where my dad lives. It never dies because nobody ever has the curiosity to actually do any reporting anymore. They just repeat and regurgitate what some bonehead at CNN came up with. We got to jump, but final word.
Well, it's astonishing to me that people still have trust in the media where these things will still circulate and get traction, because they've completely worn out their trust, as far as I'm concerned, by doing this repeatedly over and over again.
Yep. Seth, Dillon, thank you so much. Great to see you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, and same.